So welcome everybody to the PCDN Career Series webinar on blockchain, or block what, for social good, with Luc Lapointe, who is co-founder of the BC Lab, also works for Impact 2030, and has had a long history, over 25-year career working on innovative finance, development, blockchain, which is much newer, migration. He's worked on all sorts of projects in Colombia and around the world, and is really a leading expert on innovative finance. And he is based in Cali, Colombia. We are based in Medellin, Colombia. This is not a bias of Colombia people, but we're delighted here. And we could spend the whole time just going over his bio, which we will not do. I'm Craig Zelzer from PCDN.
And I'm the funny one, Catalina Rojas, also at PCDN.
Dr. Funny.
Funny.
And before we get fully into the session, we're delighted to have Luc here with us today. A couple of kind of tidbits. We're going to be recording this session, and we will put it on YouTube later on and on PCDN. So if you do regret what you say, Luc, or anybody asks something controversial, just let us know, and we can either edit it out or not put it up.
I like that.
We do have people zooming in from around the world. So far we have Colombia, London, Belarus. Someone just said our audio is breaking. Can you hear us okay, Luc?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Yes, thank you.
So Anjali, try if you have headphones, because if other people have problems with sound, let us know. But so far, the system seems to be working well. But please let us know in the chat function if you're having problems. So we have Colombia, London, Belarus, India. And please let us know, anyone calling in from North America. I guess we have the Global South represented today.
But
London.
And Luc read Juliet. Juliet's. Can he get access to that?
Yes, Luc can see the comments. Throughout this session, Luc's going to do a short presentation, but please put your questions or comments at any time in the chat box, and we will get to them periodically. And if you have a longer, so Anjali says there's a little bit of an audio breaking, a lag in the audio. Can anyone else hear us? Thank you for letting us know, Anjali. Anyone else noting any break? I mean, what I can do too is try headphones, but then we won't be able to do it together.
Yeah.
Luc, you're hearing us okay, and everybody else?
Yes, I can hear you fine. Yes, absolutely. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so Nina says she can hear fine. So other people, let us know if you do have problems hearing us. But for right now, it sounds like, or Anjali, maybe turn off the video in case.
It's not it's only Anjali.
So apologies for technical difficulties. So at any time, please put your questions in the Zoom chat. And once Luc is finished with his presentation, if you have longer comments, we can invite you to turn on your video. So Luc, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and generosity on this mysterious thing called the blockchain. And so we will turn it over to you. And again, we've got people from DC, London, India, Belarus, Colombia, and I know I'm missing a few other places.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so great to have everyone here, and thank you for joining us. Now we'll turn it over to you.
No, thank you, Craig, for inviting me and giving me an opportunity to discuss a little bit of what blockchain is. As I said, sorry, I have an accent in English, French, and Spanish, so it doesn't matter which language we'll be using today. I'm originally from Canada, but 5 years here in Colombia, where, as you mentioned, we've been working on innovative finance for peace. And then during the course of looking at finance and the complexity of financing peace, and we encountered this technology, which is nothing new. I think it goes back to 2008, called blockchain. and started to say, how do we use blockchain? And first of all, I didn't know much of it. And I think, like you, I think blockchain is for everything. So we can use it for anything in life. But the real experts on blockchain, the one that codes and put all these transactions together, always bring me back to reality and says, yes, we can use blockchain for anything, but maybe it has to be more purposeful in the way that it's being used. As there's other technology that exists for a long time, as we know, in dealing with information. So just to start a little bit, I think most people would know that the blockchain goes back to 2008, and was a famous Satoshi Nakamoto that created this technology, or helped create this technology, and it was meant to basically create, or I guess resolve the problem around double spending on the internet, where if you have a digital asset, that you could spend that digital asset many times unless you have a proven record or a system of trust that would exist. So that was the building blocks of the blockchain, which became Bitcoin eventually, that nobody really cared about. But some people had some remorse after that. I think most of us knew the Bitcoin when it was $100, and now it's worth several $1,000s. But we're not going to focus more so much on the Bitcoin, but more of the technology behind it. Why do we think that blockchain can help resolve a lot of issues around financing peace or financing development? It's still new, as I said, as a technology in the way that it's being used now around identity. So I think some of the building blocks for blockchain is the trust, the decentralization of information. So we're used of having one major agency to centralize the information for us. It allows us as well for what they call built-in gamification. So this is where you can create incentive when you create your communities on the blockchain. So these are some of the pillars around the blockchain. So you can create trust very rapidly. In this case, right now, if we want to deal with exchanging money between the three of us or all the participants in this space, then we'd have to go through a central bank or a local bank, and it would take about 3 days before a transaction takes place. And again, it's an extremely costly process of trust that exists where the banks lend this space, or it could be used in other space. But I think the financial transaction is a good place to start explaining blockchain right now, where banks will verify my identity and will verify that the person receiving the money at the other end is the person that it's supposed to be, that it's intended for. Right? So looking at blockchain in this case is basically looking at a community of individuals or practitioners, and it could be an open blockchain, or it could be a closed blockchain, in a way that if you want your information to be public, this is I guess the premise of the blockchain is to make everything transparent. But there's also some confidential information that you want sometime to be kept aside, not to be made public. And I think the recent law in Europe might make things a little bit complicated with the blockchain, as it gives people a chance to erase your information in time. But the blockchain is exactly the opposite of this. Once you create that information, it's there forever. So you can't delete that information, but you can create new blocks of information. So I think the important thing to note right now, I think for us, what we've learned with the blockchain and working with different companies that have different protocols. You have a Bitcoin protocol, so they have their own protocol, and what they do right now, what they do provide for people wanting to use the blockchain is a wide system or a global system of networks that are connected, of miners that can verify the information. And you have Ethereum, the next big one, and there's so many other big ones as well that provide this network. So if you want to create your own, then it's a little bit more expensive in the way that you have to create your network. Eventually, you have servers that will receive the information because the information is decentralized. So this is some of the considerations that take in place before you look at either building your own protocol or create your own token. And we can go into so many details of all these those different components of the blockchain. But one of the things that I also wanted to discuss is recently, I think it was last week in New York, there was a big event around the blockchain for social impact, or blockchain for good. And this group of individuals are looking at creating an SDG-like wallet or cryptocurrencies, where you could have one cryptocurrency for each of the SDGs. And I think it's a good fundraising mechanism. But again, at the end, I think we're all going to get stuck with the same issues as, if we create a lot of interest in these cryptocurrencies, how do we spend them well and on the social good? This is where we find some of the discussion we're having with local financial service providers, with the people that have the ability to develop the blockchain or the protocol associated with the blockchain, and connecting them between the funding and the needs. This is still a lot of testing taking place right now. I don't know if you have any question, Craig, as we go on and get into the details. Or
I think let's say you're talking to your elderly relative who is like, block what? And so what problem is the blockchain solving? So the idea that it's creating a transparent ledger that, can you just walk us through a bit more? Like, let's say we had a financial transaction between the three of us. Where right
Absolutely.
now, let's say right now you were paying us $100. You said right now that can go through a bank or PayPal, credit card company, but how would that function on the blockchain? You know,
Exactly, and I think that's a good question, because I think if you explain this to somebody of my age, it's a little bit older, and goes back to the early age of technology. Again, I think we can all look at the ledgers where we used to enter transactions. So this is what they call it a distributed ledger, where you put the first transaction, and then basically Craig transferred the money to Luke, and it goes on, but that information can be erased in time. Anybody can go in and erase a portion of that ledger, and nobody gets a copy of that ledger as well. It's a unique person taking the ledger. In this case, what blockchain does is create these blocks that are connected, and i.e. the chain and the blockchain. We're using distributed ledger technology. Every transaction is recorded on each transaction. And a code of 64 characters is created to create that individual block of information that cannot be erased. So from that information, you can go back and find out what information is contained in that block of information, right? So in the case of using distributed ledger technologies, that all of us have the same information on the transaction that are taking place and are verified by the group as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is where blockchain compared to and we had the same discussion last year with the Minister of Finance here in Colombia, and they said, well, we have the best system in place, the best technology, the best database, where we can verify the information, our own procurement system, who gets paid. But again, at the end of the day, there's a few individuals that can go in to this database and erase information, or erase contract, or erase documents that have been uploaded to create that trust on the information that has been gathered. Mm-hmm. So this is something that the technology of the blockchain prevents, is that the information cannot be changed. So if you want to change the information in the past, you have to create a new block of information that explains why this changed, and it has to be accepted by the community in general.
Mm-hmm. And can you say a little bit more? So let's say we send you $100. How does that, so we send you the money, there's electronic record with the 64 digits that everyone who's verifying it, gets distributed to computers around the world. How does someone decide this is a legitimate transaction, the $100 we sent you, verifiable and trustworthy versus, it's a fraud? And then we have a question here, just to be more specific, from Suzanne.
So where
are the blocks stored? So how does everyone have access to it? So basically, how does this, where does this block go, and how does everyone have access?
That's right. Yeah. So the reason we have the blockchain, the way that it's been structured, is that it sits on different servers. So the information sits on the computer, sits on a different server where the information was generated, and this is where the miners come in and authenticate the information that's being loaded. So who is Craig, for example, in this case? And does the money been basically put? Does he have the capacity, or does he have the $100 in his hand right now in the system, so it could begin this taking the transaction between you and I in this case, right? So the information is validated at both ends, and the information is uploaded on the blockchain, which is basically servers or computers around the world that guard the information. So it's decentralized in a way that we can exchange that information.
So can the blockchain almost be seen like a cloud system, or like cloud computing where it's all living on servers, or does it kind of live on individual computers or servers?
Right now, it's been used mostly on individual servers around the world. So this is why Bitcoin and Ethereum have these mega servers that allows for all these transactions to be verified. It's extremely costly, and a lot of them have moved to northern communities because it's using a lot of energy, right, to maintain that information. Or these big servers that allow all these transactions to take place. So it's not on an individual. It's on an individual, but you need these servers to validate all the mining that are taking place, to verify the information between all the transactions that are taking place at the same time.
So questions coming.
And please keep as many questions coming as possible, because the goal is to demystify this.
The goal is to understand this thing. So very good question from Susan. With the blocks on mega servers, who is paying for the mega servers? Love that question.
Exactly. Well, who's paying for this? I mean, eventually the users are paying for this. I mean, right now the investors are putting in the money in Bitcoins and all these other token offers. And this is what most companies are doing. Says we want to launch an ICO, which is getting harder to do in the US. It's easier to do outside of the US.
So coin offering, ICO system.
Exactly. Thank you. And now a lot of people are using IPO, so an initial private offers instead of an ICO, which is much easier to do in the US for security reason or the Security Commission reason. Security regulation, sorry. And these mega servers eventually are, as I said, are paid by transaction. So nothing is really free, but it's less costly than the system that we have right now. So these mega servers are paid from investors right now who see a benefit eventually from the use of a certain protocol, those that are having more success right now. And there's about 10 of them that are extremely successful right now, the Bitcoins and the Ethereum and the Stellar, for example, which are less fluctuates less than other token, for example.
Well, everyone is asking very clever questions, but I really, my questions are not clever, but you're doing great look at explaining, but I'm trying to understand, connected to what Craig was saying, like what is blockchain replacing? What is blockchain solving? What problem was there that now blockchain is solving? And is blockchain, because I understand PayPal, right? PayPal is paying, to send the money. That's how a lot of things our clients pay us.
And they have a fraud system, people working fraud and algorithms to help prevent fraud.
But is blockchain, like, what is the purpose? Is it recording? Is it, and then what problem is it solving? Because I still,
And then one related question or comment might be helpful. I think you've said it, but just making clear, there's a big difference between blockchain, the technology, and then cryptocurrencies. So I think if you could differentiate those two a little bit, because it would help.
Yeah, I think the blockchain and the cryptocurrency are two in one at the same time. I think the blockchain as we know it is the technology behind what cryptocurrencies are using to validate the transaction, or to make a community of individuals use a certain portion of the technology. So, for example, in the case of you were asking, what is it solving at the end of the day? I guess between transaction right now, if you want to verify the information or the validity of the information that is being stored, or for example, if you're Craig has a house and he claims to be the owner of that house or that property, right? Right now, you have to go to a notaries, or you have to go to public agencies to verify all that information. Normally, pay a lawyer or some kind of a third person to validate and says, okay, this is right. You can do the transaction group. Craig, because he's the owner. In this case, now you skip the middleman basically, because the information has been validated in the space, called inside a blockchain, where the information you can see in time, where normally you would have to go to City Hall and find that information, every document, who was the original owner and who have done the transaction on this particular property, right? So in the case of Colombia, I think it serves even more for the problem of during the years of drug cartels, right? There's nobody's really sure about the origin of a property, so it creates that trust where you know exactly who was the owner and how was that property acquired in time. But I think there's just so many things that could be done. I think with technology, and this is what we're looking at using it here in the peace context, so financing peace, for example, where if you would have more impact in Colombia or the small projects, for example, $30,000 investment in campesinos. But again, these are not very attractive transactions to investors. They're too small. The cost to do the due diligence around the project, around the individual, would require a lot of individuals. And the costs are always passed down to the individuals. In this case, what the blockchain can do is aggregate a lot of information on different servers, so you don't need to centralize the information, send it to one governing agencies who will decide. Again, may have a bias about the information that they're receiving, what gets in, what gets out. In this case, it's all public. It's part of the blockchain. The community accepts the information. It's validated through the miners or the different individuals that come in.
So there's two questions here. So let's start with Susan's, and then we'll get to Yanina's. And please keep questions, comments, or if anybody has some experience or wants to, you can turn on your video if you want to say something longer. So Susan's question is, it sounds like as a member of the public, can anybody access the blockchain? So imagine you're Susan or Luke, and you're sitting and you have access to a computer or smartphone. How do you actually get access and view the blockchain? I think that's what she's asking.
That's right. Yeah. And yeah, getting access to a blockchain, I mean, it's out there. It's just the purpose of why you would want to access a blockchain. So are you looking for cryptocurrency and expect to make some money out of it, or you're part of a community and you will be developing or using a protocol based on one of these platforms. Could be Bitcoin, could be Ethereum, could be many of the others that exist, and you're using that platform basically to do transaction, to validate your transaction. So it's accessible to anybody. There are costs in doing the transaction. This is what people are betting on, right? That the servers or the protocols that they're having will be better than the other ones. They're more flexible. They're more rapid in the way that you take these transactions.
So I think for Susan's question, for anyone, like if they just want to look at a blockchain, where do you go? Like if you want to understand, like how do I look at a blockchain transaction or this public ledger, where should someone start? Not if they're investing, but curious. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the blockchains are basically all over so it's not a physical thing that you go and look at, other than a bunch of codes or coding that take place on an algorithm that take place on different computers to validate transactional, depending on what you want to use a blockchain for. So it's not a physical thing, other than seeing the operation of Bitcoin in China, or these big mega servers that are out there that are storing that information or doing the crypto mining. But physically seeing a block of chains, I mean, it's I mean, which one can I use right now that you can go in, and most of them are, as I said, unless you're doing a transaction, or not something that you can just go in and say, well, take a look inside and see what's happening on that blockchain. So you have to be part of a community to actually come in and start using some of these blockchain, or go into a blockchain and validate or see all the coding that takes place, or the ledgers that are being developed, right, within a particular blockchain.
And so is that well? Let's continue.
Keep questions coming.
Thank you, Jan. Janina.
I'm seeing one here. Yeah, I see one here. If we're familiar with any organization that's been employing blockchain outside of cryptocurrencies, so there are many. Right now, one that's interesting that was developed from IXO Foundation in Zurich was around the use of identity. So, for example, early childhood education, where the government actually has to pay the service providers for early childhood education. So every time somebody comes in, somebody has to go on paper and writes, okay, Johnny is here, and Paul is here, and Manuel is here, and send that pile of information to say, okay, well, we've had all of these people, so now the government can actually pay us, right, and pay the service providers for all the services that they provided in early childhood education. In this case, this is the other part, other than having the distributed ledger technology that does the blockchain, is just what they call smart contracts. And the smart contracts basically are contracts between two or many individuals that automatically takes place. For example, right now, if you have somebody, in this case, I guess the early childhood education, where somebody is coming into school and the government says, I need to verify that these people are coming into to the service providers, then they'll make the payment. So there's a lot of transaction that needs to take place to be verified once it's on the blockchain. And then we all agree about the payment structure. Then these payments take place automatically. So the service provider says, well, right now at this moment, I can tell you that there's 25 people or it's 50 people, and the payment can take place automatically. Or you can even measure the impact. If you're looking at creating a social impact bond over the blockchain right now, you would have to go back. If you have 1,000 participants in the social impact bonds around employability, whatever the purpose of the bond is for, you'd have to go back in time and get somebody to go in and capture all that information, centralize the information, validate the information, and eventually write a report or do some statistical work around the information that you're getting. What the blockchain provides right now is the information is decentralized, and you can actually see this in real time, the information. So you don't need to go and collect that information on paper or through an Excel spreadsheet or other type of database. Right? So it's much more flexible in the way that it manages information.
So there's a question from Don, and I'll get back to Janina. After we get to understand what blockchain is, how do you see it linked to social change, and how can early adopters make use of this new technology?
Yeah, no, this is I guess that was the one of the reasons for that big event that took place in New York a couple of weeks ago around blockchain for social good. I think right now it's creating this community that's still fairly new, right? As I said, the blockchain and the way that it's being used right now in social good, but definitely a lot of interest between different communities now that are coming together and saying, how do we use a protocol like Stellar's? Because some of the problem I'll give you an example. Climate Coin, for example, who's been extremely successful in creating a token for around climate change. But originally we were built on the Ethereum, so you'd have to buy Ethereum, and the dollar or that token was associated with the Ethereum. So if the price went down, then all the money that was invested was actually lost, right? But now you're seeing more platforms that are not about speculation, but they're providing that. I guess the token is basically you can call them an e-vouchers or whatever you want to call this thing. Right now, the token is the accepted terminology within the blockchain communities, where basically it gives a cost to any transaction that you do. So be it for social good or be it for economic good, then that token represents an impact that you want to measure. It represents an asset that you're trying to move, what you're trying to use in this case, right? So I don't know if it explains a little bit more about the social change right now. I think there's a lot of these blockchain companies. The one that we use, for example, Topple. I mean, they're all out there saying we have the technology, we have the protocol. Now we need to put that in practice, and this is what the communities are looking at. Right? How do we find these projects where we can actually apply this technology, start measuring the impact, and see the practicability of the blockchain and for social change.
So there's a question from me, Nina. What are the benefits and challenges of granting full access to the ledgers, like the blockchain ledger? It's like, are there any danger to having this fully accessible by anyone in the world, or it's all full transparency?
No, the making it public, it's opening it to your own communities that wants to use it. So if you have a Bitcoin, for example, anybody that buys a Bitcoin has access to the whole blockchain of information. But in the case where you're having your own communities of practitioners, or you want to do it, for example, around early childhood education, so you can close that community. So anybody inside can actually have access to the information, but nobody outside can actually see that information. And you can decide on different layers within the block of information that you want to share with the community in general.
So other questions or comments, or I guess, Luke, when someone says to you, like, this block stuff all sounds super complicated and weird, like, what are other examples where you're seeing it put into practice, not just on the speculation end in terms of trying to make money, but like elections in Sierra Leone, or like what are people say, like, what are the best examples of how it's been used at scale to date? Are there any in the social impact space where you can say elections, land titling?
Yeah, and I think you just mentioned it, the recent use of the blockchain technology for voting, exactly where the identity of the individuals or everybody that was voting was put on the blockchain. So again, it provided a more transparent process in the election process, where again, there's no corruption or no space for corruption or changing the information, altering the information. One that I just mentioned was for the social impact bond. It's being built on the blockchain right now. So again, we have built one in Colombia, as you know, with Fundación Corona. But again, you have 1,500 participants. It's hard right now to get the information. You have to wait a long time. One was recently built in using IXO Foundation, social bonds. You can actually see all the participants and start measuring the impacts as you move into the project. And even it could be even for early adopters of impact investment, is a way for them to actually be able to measure the impact and not to wait till the end of the project to see what are the impacts, right? And even give more value to the way that it's being used.
Karen is asking, and I have a question, but okay. So Donna has a question. Having visual examples would help understand the Bitcoin ecosystem, especially as applied to social change. Do any exist?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, again, if the Bitcoin is one thing, and the Ethereum and all these other cryptocurrency are one thing. I think they're technology, and it can be used for anything. I mean, whatever you want to buy with a Bitcoin or whatever is allowed. And again, some countries have some limit in the way that you may want to use cryptocurrencies if it's for speculating or for doing money transaction. But I think it's better just to stick to blockchain as technology instead of focusing on the Bitcoin or the Ethereum, because now Ethereum creates a system where it's blockchain as a service. You can actually use that technology, the technology that they developed, for your own purposes or whatever you want it for social good. So in the case of the SDGs, I think that's a good example. The discussion that took place last week in New York, a lot of interest to have the ability to be more transparent in the way people can invest in the different SDGs right around the world. In the case right now, for example, if you say I'm interested in gender issues, so if you put your money into a fund, you don't know SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. I think that was the question I just saw there. But an example for if you say, well, my interest is to invest in the gender issue. So right now, if you have your dollar and you put it in the fund, I mean, it's mixed into the fund. You don't know where your dollar has been and what it's doing or where you can generate more impact. In this case, when you put your investment in the blockchain, you can actually track where your investment is going instead of having part of a pooled fund where you know that 20, 30, or 50% goes to different topics or different issue, right? But this is a better way to track your own investment in social good, right? If you're specific to an issue.
So Karen's question that you can see there, it's similar, but she's familiar with blockchain, eliminating the middleman, like you explained in cash assistance programs. And so you talk about the SDGs. Do you know of any other international organizations like the UN that is using blockchain?
Well, I think there's a big group out of the UK right now that is coming together, creating their own communities around doing mitigating the risk in transferring money around the world in different currencies. So using a cryptocurrency instead of using dollars or yen or different currencies, using that currency as a way in which it deals with different currencies. So these are models in which the blockchain can provide a lot of support and understanding. But at the end of the day, if you do it for a money transaction, you will be faced with the same issues that eventually you need somebody to cash in. Where do I cash these cryptocurrencies? Or, what do I do with my monies? I'll give you an example here in Colombia. We're working with a group of campesinos, working with a milk company. So the milk company every time they go and buy the milk from these campesinos, they have to go one by one and give them cash because most of them don't have a bank account, and most of them will take that money and will hide it in a box and store it somewhere in their house or somewhere. In this case, now the company is using a digital wallet and paying the campesinos with digital money. So it has the same values. It's 100,000 pesos or 100 million pesos, whatever the price is for milk. And they receive it instantly. So if you bring the milk in, it takes 2 seconds, the money is into your digital wallet. But at the end of the day, what do I do with digital money unless you have a place to spend it? Somebody wants to do this. So you have networks like in Colombia right now, you're using a Red Mobile. So it doesn't matter where you can pay your cell phone, you can actually cash in and that money that is put into your digital wallet. So it's safe, it's secured in the blockchain. You can use it. You can cash in different places around Colombia, for example. So we're using it a lot here as the access to financial services is often an issue in the remote areas of Colombia. Not limited to Colombia, many places around the world. But this is where the blockchain can actually help companies and speed the payment process that will take place with campesinos in this case. Right?
And I'll share, so we go to South by Southwest, where Catalina got an award, and it's one of the coolest conferences in the world. And one of the companies I interviewed this year, it's on our Facebook page somewhere, it's a company called Leaf. It's a startup that is piloting blockchain for refugees who are displaced. The idea is when people have to flee their homes, at short notice, they often can't take a lot of resources or they'll get robbed along the way. So they're trying to work with people who are being displaced to basically take real currency, whatever their national currency is, give it to someone who converts it to a stellar currency. It's one of the currencies on the blockchain, or one of the protocols. And then when they get to the next place, be able to access that and reconvert it to cash currency. So that they're piloting right now. They're trying to do it in Colombia, and I think they pilot in Rwanda. So it's a pilot idea, but it's a real problem that when people, nobody should have to flee their homes, but if you do, how can you help safeguard their financial resources? But also there's a lot about identity. Because a lot of times when people have to flee, they can't take their documents, educational documents or birth certificates. And so one of the big ideas in the humanitarian development space is, can you digitize and put identity documents, your health or your education, so wherever you go in the world, you could have access to them. Because this is one of the big, I'm on an advisory board of a group out of Geneva called InZone that works with long-term displaced populations.
Exactly.
And so you might have done your education, but if you've got no physical proof or paper proof to it, like it's very hard to do that. So there's interesting applications now. How do we digitize your records? And it's still all in the pilot phase, but those are some real life examples where blockchain technology could provide really usable solutions for populations that are having challenges in the global financial and educational system.
No, absolutely. And it's not, as you mentioned, it's not just about financial transactions. It's being used right now to facilitate financial transaction or to digitize financial transaction, to help companies or campesinos. And I see another question about what technology does a campesino needs, and this is what we've done in this project is basically trying to make it as simple as possible, so it can be done over WhatsApp or SMS message, where you can just send the information and you have your digital wallet, and the blockchain allows you that information is secure. Nobody can actually tamper with your own information, so it cannot be stolen or used for other purposes. So again, it's trying to make it as simple as possible. You don't need very fast computers to do these transactions. All you need is eventually to be connected. So these transactions could take place once you connect back, because all of these campesinos eventually go to a city, some of the goods, or go to a place where there's an internet connection or communication.
You just got a whole bunch of questions. People are asking, can it be accessed on a dumb phone, or has to be a smartphone? Like basically, what do you need in terms of?
Yeah, exactly. So what we found, for example, here in Colombia, campesinos, or even in Agua Blanca, in one of the poor areas, is people have at least a basic phone, and so as long as you can send an SMS message, you could do a transaction or a financial transaction through an e-digital or an e-wallet, in which people will call it cryptocurrency, but you can call them e-vouchers or depending on. So it's not limited to a cryptocurrency.
And so what you were saying is, as long as you have that flip phone where you can get and send text, then you have the campesino gets paid for their milk, that money or that cryptocurrency, look at me, goes to the e-wallet, that I can understand. And then they actually go to a point of one of the biggest, strongest financial institutions, traditional banking, called Colombia. And then we can go there and convert that crypto into like the money that they need to go and purchase their needs or whatever it is. They can cash it in, right?
Yeah. In this case, is looking at alternative service providers or alternative financial service providers, a little bit like Western Union did. I mean, they've never opened a bank, or I think they have a few banks maybe, but they've used a small mom and pop shop to actually have a teller there where you can actually, receive your money eventually. You don't need to go to a bank. Exactly. Yes. Exactly. So using these different service providers, so we know that campesinos will eventually go somewhere to buy the insumos or the products that they use every day for their farming. So this is where they can cash in the digital wallet. Says, well, we'll buy these products with the money that I've got in my digital wallet, but now I can actually also cash in because I need cash to do goods, because it's not accepted everywhere. So these are practical examples. I think somebody is asking, beyond financial transaction, I think you the identity of people, where you can store the information, land, information about the land, information about impact, about individual. That you've mentioned identity. I think it's interesting because now the discussion around having a blockchain driver's license or information technology driver's license, so that one identity that you can use on any protocol, right? Because right now you need a password, and the platforms are not interoperable. Is that a word in English?
Yeah. Or compatible.
Exactly, compatible. Yeah. So I think the idea of having this one identity, that's not just your driver's license, or it's not your cédula in this case in Colombia. We can have a one digital information or driver's license, whatever you want to call this thing, that allows you to verify your identity on different platforms that you may want to use, instead of having different passwords. Right?
Can you provide a little bit more of an example? So imagine, we have a U.S. driver's license. I want to get a Colombia license. But how would it actually work? So let's say you move countries or states. How would you actually take your verified identity and get it recognized by the authorities wherever you? Can you walk us through those steps? Like, how would your identity in one place be recognizable and accredited in another place.
Exactly. Yeah. In this case, right now, I mean, if somebody wants to, if the government of Colombia wants to do this, they'll have to verify or believe that the information that you're giving them is free. There's no is real. So there's no place to verify other than calling the state and saying, okay, this is Greg's picture and this is the right identification. But in the case when it's in the case where you're in the U.S. or we're seeing it in Colombia, for example, in the way of land restitution, for example. I'll just use another example and I'll go back to this, but land restitution, right? So you cannot go back in time because you'll have to put all that information over the blockchain, but everything that takes place as of today, once you start putting it on the blockchain, will be there forever to be verified. It's been verified and trusted, right? So in the case of your identity, eventually you need the government of the US or the state that issued your license to make that license verifiable on the blockchain, so that Colombia can actually say, well, we trust that information. A little bit like you know your customers in a bank, where saying, is it really you at the other end of the chain that is making the transaction? So unless government are starting to use the blockchain, then it's only used for a limited amount of individuals. So, if you want Bitcoin in this case, or if you're doing within the communities, it could be the social good communities. You can use that information, right? I see there's another question.
This is the episode or the webinar with historically more questions that we've had. So we are the winners of Luke's the winner. So here you go. But you do have the question from Juliet that I think is so interesting. What do you think of that, Luke?
No, there's definitely a question that is daily, I think, within the blockchain communities, or even within people outside, because now all that information is public and it's there forever in time. So it's not like right now I can go and do any transaction at the store. Nobody knows where my money came from, and nobody knew what I bought. So in this case, this is something that is always a question from within not only the blockchain communities, but users. Once that information is there, then I guess the state can start using all that information to find out everything about you, or as Google does right now anyway. So every time you do a search, every time you go on the site or send an email or Facebook, all these other things, so they know exactly what you're doing, and they share that information or sell that information. So I guess the blockchain maybe takes it to another level. Once you start doing these transactions, and you can do the plus and minus very quickly to know if you're laundering money or if you really had the income to actually buy all the thing that you said you're buying, right? So I think it does, it could create that space where surveillance about your identity or your private transaction now can be more public, and maybe this is not what everybody wants. But again, when it comes to money laundering and terrorism financing, then these are, I think, good practices. That information, we know that the person who has the money who are making the transaction or the.
And so I've been reading a lot about kind of the early history of crypto and blockchain, even kind of pre-blockchain. And the really interesting thing, a lot of the people who started the early movements were almost crypto anarchists and libertarians. So it's important to know, even though there's almost like a fundamental debate in the blockchain or crypto world of people who want this to be like an alternative universe to governments, where people can just trust each other because of technology, and then there's others who want to really commercialize this and make a lot of money out of it. It's the same way like the way the early internet started, the vision utopia for the world, everyone have access, and then the internet's largely been taken over by mega companies. So what is your opinion of the future of the blockchain technology in terms of this idealistic notion where we can have trust between individuals around the world? Or is it just going to become kind of like the super internet where it's commercialized and commodified and privacy goes away?
Well, I think the both of them will exist as they do exist now. You have the web and you've got the dark web, and you have the the blockchain. Some of them that are more public, and some other that are used with the information, the data, everything that is being done inside the blockchain is shared or could be sold to different companies, or you can create your own network eventually. And I think this is what you'll see out of these big platforms eventually, is that some companies will focus, or some group will focus on their own blockchain, where information is kept private, it's kept within a group, and it's meant for social purposes. In this case, doesn't mean that it's not for profit, but it has more of a social purposes, and it's created for communities, and only a portion of the information that you want to share will be made public, right? It becomes that community at the end of the day that makes that decision. Right now, if you go on Bitcoin, then you don't have much decision. Your information is transparent. Everything that you do, your transactions are transparent to the community.
So you've got a couple of questions. One, Juliet's question, I think you answered some, but is there examples of the blockchain being used maliciously? I think the example might be early Bitcoin transactions. A lot of the Bitcoin transactions, the first Bitcoin transaction ever was, I forgot how many Bitcoins it was, but someone bought pizza in Italy using Bitcoins. But a lot of the early Bitcoin transactions were for, let's say, not the best activity, so drugs and
exactly.
So that's an example of a cryptocurrency on the blockchain initially being used for not great purposes to avoid banking and money laundering.
Yeah, and it's still happening today. I think and this is why the government wants more control over what's happening on the blockchain, and what becomes transparent. Again, to prevent this type of information. It's interesting as well as you see a more interest to create your own currencies or create your own token within the communities, but eventually you have to put a value to these assets. But there was an interesting discussion in the US around banks 100 years ago created their own currencies, right? So you had a Bank of America currencies, and each bank had their own currencies. Eventually they decide, no, this is not the best way to go about the economy, so we have to create one currency, which was the US dollars, right? So now you're going back in time. This is what the blockchain is doing, and they'll probably raise some interesting discussion. I'm just seeing our guest host having a yogurt, enjoying your yogurt.
It's a blockchain yogurt. Are the cows on the blockchain so you can look at the source?
Exactly.
So you have a question. There's a question from Anjum, using blockchain to do the same things, but is there potential for the blockchain to radically change? What could it evolve into?
Yeah, when it comes to auditing or making payments, I guess the same thing is right now. Everything exists; it's happening right now. People are doing it, within their own Excel spreadsheet, or somebody going and gathering that information, or we need that information in that format. This is how we will use the information. But right now, this is what the blockchain will allow: is for everybody to keep their record and make them public to whomever you want to make them public. So it could be close to, an accounting firm working with their clients, or different companies within or different units of your own company. So you can make these records public now. You don't need to wait to centralize them to have access to that information. So it could be used to do the auditing and the payment. And it was a good event a couple of weeks ago in Zurich around the social impact bond. As you can see very quickly in time if you're generating impact, and you can create even more value for your bond, basically your social impact bonds, right? We're halfway into this program, or what we thought we were going to get for result or outcomes. So it creates even more value for the government or the outcome payers at this time.
I do have a question, and I've learned a lot. Luke, thank you so much for your patience in us asking the same questions in a slightly different way, because it's just, there are so many questions that are popping up. But say that you have motivated me so much into thinking that where do I go to learn more about blockchain, to train myself in that, so that I have that as a skill that I can put in my CV, maybe to work in a humanitarian organization, or maybe to work in the Ministry of Finance, or in a post-conflict implementation project, or maybe to start my own startup. Where do I go and get myself trained to learn and offer that as a skill to be used and applied in the social change world?
Yeah, for sure. I think right now the biggest platform that has the information is Coursera, where you can find a lot of the MOOC, multiple online. MOOCs, exactly.
Oh, so there are MOOCs that teach you blockchain? Okay.
Absolutely. So they'll give you the basic, and basically you don't need to be a an expert in coding. I think all of this thing exists out there. I think it's just how do you use blockchain, or for what purposes will you use blockchain to transfer money? Again, to create a communities of stakeholder, as we're doing with, for example, with a milk company that's 3,000 campesinos, or 3,000 campesinos with cooperative of campesinos.
Yes.
How do you connect these 3,000 right now, which are done on paper, somebody going on the road collecting all that information. But now it's how do you use blockchain to simplify everything that you're doing right now, on paper, and how do you make payments even more transparent? Sometimes the campesinos right now are wait up to 90 days before they actually get paid. But this, speeds up the process for them through the smart contracts and having it transparent.
So I guess a related question, and also just to put out there, Tech Change, I'm on their advisory board.
That's right, yes, absolutely.
Company, they have a course in blockchain for international development. I think they ran it in January. So you might check it out. In full transparency, they do advertise with us sometimes, but it's a really good course.
But they're not paying us right now. This is totally free because we love them.
Because we love them. So it's not an advertisement. So a related question is, if someone wants to build a career, it's got this thing in blockchain, like what do you see are the emerging career paths? So is it a coder who knows Python who can do this? Like what are the career paths for people who really want to get into this? Like what's emerging?
Yeah, I think for me, what I see the future is the people that will be able to see, not really understand the technology, but understand the basic of what the blockchain is and how can you apply it to your space of work. So it could be in anything, but I think this is where where they'll be looking for people. All the platforms are the different cryptocurrency, the different blockchain we've been speaking to. We're saying, okay, well, we've got technology, but we don't know anything about social good, or we'd be interested to use it in this space because we think it could provide a lot of ease in the way that information is managed, right? So I think this is where for me the future. We're looking at developing a master degree on innovative finance, but we want to connect the blockchain to this, right? Well, I think this is unless you're really into programming in Python or Scala or different coding programs that exist out there. I think the big space will be how do you use technology and how do you put this to use in your space of work, within NGOs, civil societies, with transaction, with identity, with generating more impact or more rapidly, more transparent.
And we're almost running out of time, but I feel like we should invite you over. But maybe we have a few minutes because to talk a little bit about what you mentioned briefly, what you're doing in Colombia with blockchain. But if you can briefly tell us again in a few minutes we have left, I think that will help us land a lot of how you're using this technology in a I don't know if to call Colombia conflict, post-conflict. That's another debate, but how are you using it? Maybe it will be a brilliant way to sort of close.
And then just to put that into that, so someone asked to comment, do you have any papers or writing about this you can see? So I know you've got some blogs, but if you send us anything, we'll email it out to everybody, or you can look at your website. But also, like, if people wanted to get in contact with you, just, like, what kind of services or wisdom do you offer for people who want to engage in this?
Yeah, just before this call, we actually had a call with impact investment platforms. They're saying, how do we're interested in working in Colombia, for example, but again, they don't know who all the financial service providers are. Where do you find information about the project? This is where we're using blockchain, or looking at blockchain in a way that, if you look at the gamut of financial service providers that are working out there, or even NGOs in the space of, Putumayo, it doesn't matter where you're looking at Colombia. This is a gamut of fragmented organization and financial service providers not really working together. And this is what we see a big benefit of blockchain, not only blending vertically, but also horizontally. What again, the government says, okay, well, we're putting a lot of money into the campesinos to get them from coca to cacao. But again, the problem is not going from one crop to the other. It's the bridge that needs to be financed, the school that needs to be financed, it's the clinic that needs to be financed. I mean, if you want to do impact investment and you put everything in a campesinos, if there's no health clinic and the guy gets sick, or the person gets sick, then that's probably your your biggest risk that you have in your investment, right? Having these things. So the blockchain will allow to make all that information transparent, to coordinate fragmented efforts right now in the way that a peace consultation process takes place, and the gazillions of actors, right? So, so it's a good space for hyper-collective collaboration between the stakeholders. But again, everything is in the proof of work right now. So the technology exists, the needs are there, opportunities are there. Now it's putting them into practice, so people can say, okay, well, this is working, and this is where we can use it, and in the areas in which you work, right? So I think for Colombia, the topic of trust is probably the biggest currency that you can have. Corruption. So I think all of these things that will help make things more transparent, and you'll have the ability to show that the money is getting there in this case, and you're getting the impact. I think this is what blockchain can bring anyway to Colombia and many places around the world where it's being used right now. And I think it's, from 2014, 2015, this is when it's really picking up, or the speed in which it's being applied.
We have the last question. Yeah. Do you know of any post-conflict stabilization use of blockchain in a context like that?
Yeah, but again, I guess, sorry?
I'll just put out there, has any major bilateral aid donor or foundation said we're going to put all of our funding record, then whether it's USAID or has any major donor basically said we're going to go 100% blockchain in everything we do?
No, but we're finally getting to a stage where they're saying, okay, now, yes, I think we need to look at blockchain as a solution to make our work more transparent and to show the impact that we're having. But we're just at this stage, I think now, where governments are coming on board. The government of Colombia last week had a good debate in the Senate around the use of blockchains. Again, I think there's always a danger to do like Dubai, where it's blockchain for everything. But I think it needs to be done, with good public policies from the government before you do blockchain for anything, which sometimes is, what I think to think about blockchain. But again, working on the public policy side from the government side with different actors, the UN is finally looking at, how do we use blockchain. So this is great. I mean, things are moving much more rapidly, but at the end of the day, unless you have projects in which you can apply the technology, then it's good to trade Bitcoin. Right?
So the last question, we haven't talked much about cryptocurrency. It's different than the blockchain. There's about 1,500 ICOs, initial coin offerings out there, or token. And we're not giving any financial advice whatsoever. But if someone wanted to learn about that aspect of the blockchain, do you have a favorite resource? Because there's a lot of fraudulent token offerings, and some coin, there's the doggy coin, and some of them are worth like billions of dollars.
The kiwi coin.
And it's interesting. So where can someone go at least to understand like what cryptocurrency is in relation to the blockchain? So not asking you for financial advice, but like
no, my God, no, that's probably the worst one, because again, it's something that I have not explored a lot, other than trying to find out who's out there, who's doing ICO. And what is the use of their token, or what is the basis, the white paper that explains a little bit of why they're using such a token. But again, no, I'm probably not the best person to ask where do you find that information, because right now I don't know of any places that I can trust and say, well, this is a good investment. Again, as you said, there's just so many out there, and there's just so many platform offering opportunities for NGOs, for anybody to create their own cryptocurrency or e-vouchers or whatever you want to call that digital transaction.
And then if people wanted to get in touch with you, if they're curious, not necessarily to ask you lots of questions, but they're interested in thinking about how you could potentially help with a project, or do you have any writing that you could share?
Absolutely. I mean, we can actually share some information about a project in which we're working right now, and the way that we're using the blockchain in the post-conflict setting. So it could be interesting. But again, at the bclab.com, our contact information is there. So always welcome people to come in and send us an email and says, can you give us some information, or who should I speak to with regards to using blockchain for the different purposes, as there's just so many things happening every day right now. But and this is why we keep ourselves abreast of who's in the field and who's doing what, so we can, we've learned from shared experience And again, more than happy to share that information back to the community.
And in terms of just favorite resources, so I think my favorite resource for blockchain is probably Medium. That's a content.
Exactly, absolutely.
But do you have two or three favorite resources? You just say like these are places you go to find information, inspiration.
No, I should have mentioned Medium. I don't know why I didn't, but definitely a place where you receive a lot of information about the white paper, the discussion. There was a good discussion today on Medium around that digital driver's license. Basically, how do you bring more interoperability between the different platforms, which is still a big issue, right? And how do you use all that information where artificial intelligence will play a big role as well on blockchain, as you have so much information, but how do you use it all, right?
And just thank you, Luke, for seriously, a lot of us, Juliet, myself included, feel that we advance.
A little bit.
And no, it's
hopefully a little bit. That's the
thing to, and it has so many implications. Like what are the governments gonna react with decentralization of information? It leaves us the whole afternoon just to ponder. And thank you so much for coming, everyone who's here, and stay tuned for what we continue. The future of work is the theme of this year at PCDN Career Series, and it's hard for us because it's all these topics that we're barely starting to comprehend, but we really want to push everyone. And I use the word deliberate push because we think that we shouldn't put for later these things. These things is not only Uber and YouTube that is changing the way we consume information and the way we work, it's everything that is changing our world, and we hope you get a little bit more prepared every day to continue doing good with all the technologies available. So thank you, Luke. We're over time by 1 minute.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and hope that we can get to Cali to visit your project and to understand even more. And thank you everyone for attending, and then stay tuned for our next webinar.
And my last suggestion for you, Luke, is I think you get a t-shirt, ask me anything about the blockchain.
That's right.
Just walk around and just get into random conversations. I had a t-shirt we got from our foundation just said think. And people came to me just asking, what am I supposed to think about? So I could see the blockchain t-shirt.
That's a good question. That's a good suggestion.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you to both of you, and hopefully this was helpful. There's just so much information out there, and as you mentioned, medium.com it's a good place to get a lot of that information, but just read, and be critical about what you read.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.